Welcome to Lecture 12. Today we'll be covering how to excel in engineering. We'll be looking at the intangibles on how to execute your life basically in an engineering environment in a very successful way. And for that, I've also invited Dr. J.R. Woodward to join me in going through all these life experiences that can help us understand how to be successful in that type of environment. One of the things I want to really emphasize, and I've been emphasizing this whole semester, is that designing an aircraft and making it successful, or a launch vehicle and making it successful, is not all about computers. And so I want to make sure that you understand what it takes to ensure that the product that actually carries humans or billion-dollar spacecraft, because if one of those spacecraft blows up, then you are affecting the taxpayer. Or if he has humans, you may be able your actions could influence them. So it is important, and today's lecture to some level is going to be philosophical, and then I'll move into the theory later. But I want to make sure you guys understand that to be successful in aerospace engineering, you have to give your 100%. And you want to be dedicated to the mission and ensuring that all the parts work correctly together. And you can't really do that if you don't give your 100%. And when you do this, you're going to get lost in the weeds. You're going to feel like, my job sometimes sucks. This is not really what I want to do. Well, let me give you a piece of advice. At the moment, you may feel that way, but you have to step back and look at the big picture and understand that your actions at work play a critical role down the road. And I went through a number of failure investigations with you guys, aircraft and launch vehicles. And a lot of those could have been avoided if people put 100% of their effort. So integrity, and we talked about that quite a bit. There's several failure investigations that failures that occurred because of lack of integrity. If you make a mistake, own the mistake. Tell your management, hey, I made a mistake here. We need to correct it. Don't cover it up, because as I discussed before, several aircraft had significant amount of issues because of decisions that are made to cover up. Honesty goes a long ways, and we talked about teamwork environment and ensuring that you're applying the technical excellence. What that means is that the minute you stop learning as an engineer, you stop being an engineer. It's important that every day you're learning from others because you don't know it all. And in aerospace engineering, I have to say, my 18-year, 20-year career, every day I learn something. And that takes you wanting to hear others and learning from others. Another issue that we encounter in aerospace engineering is we sometimes let the perfect become a hurdle. And the bottom line is, perfection can be a problem sometimes. Sometimes when you're designing a system, you just can't get to the third decimal point. You have to make some decisions and you have to make them accurately, but also balancing the fact that there's cost associated with that. So, for example, if I select composite materials, keep in mind, if I select composite materials, they're expensive. Yes, it will give you a weight savings in an aircraft launch vehicle design, but just keep in mind that's going to cost you a lot of money down the road because to maintain composites is expensive. And so you may try to do everything perfectly at the beginning, but miss the big picture and forget that the decisions you make can influence your design and also the cost of the program. Also understand that you have to pay attention to the details. One of the things I want to point out is, for example, I'm not detail oriented. If you look at my personality through the Myers-Briggs, you'll see I'm an ENTP. Well, an ENTP generally is very bad at details. So I know that about myself. So I'll ask others to help me out. Others are more detail oriented because I know that I'll have a unit problem. So I'll mix units metric system with pounds. Well, if I were to design it, I know I'm going to crash the airplane. So I need somebody else that's detail oriented to look over what I've done because my personality is one of more of a bigger picture perspective. And so just keep that in mind as you work through your career, understand your limitations as a person. And that's what I'm talking about here in this slide right here. uh, take the personality test typically when we meet. I give it in person, but understand your limitations and understand that you can flex your personality to engage with others. Learn how to mitigate conflict. I won't go through a conflict resolution class here. It's not the time and place, but there's a lot of resources you can find about this. I just want to point out that for us to be successful in aerospace designs, you have to learn how to navigate conflict, and you have to learn when to shut up and when to speak up. There's a time for everything, and sometimes conflict is better to be quiet to see how things pan out. Sometimes it mitigates by itself. Sometimes you have to learn when to step in, and so that's the balance you have to learn when you move through your career in the aerospace engineering. Because in aerospace engineering, and it's discussed multiple times, there's multiple disciplines coming together: the manufacturing team, the stress team, the fluids team, the propulsion team, the system engineering team. All these different teams are coming together. They have to learn how to work together, and you play an important role in that step. You also have to thrive in listening and learning. A lot of times in my area of expertise, and you will find that when you go to industry, people want to show off. They want to show that they're the best, and so they will not take the time to listen. They'll just be cutting people off, and trying to say, trying to pretend they know everything. And so it's important that you thrive in an environment where you can listen and learn, because the people that I've seen the most successful are not the ones that show off, are the ones that kind of take a step back, listen to everybody, and then provide an informed opinion. We talked about that when we covered the Challenger failure investigation as an example. Recognizing success is very important. So you may not be the one that solved the problem, but somebody else did. Try to recognize that success. The other thing is, one of the things I've seen uh, actually influence failures is gossiping. If you don't get along with your team members, you will not work together. As a consequence, there will be problems in your design. Things are not going to come together very oiled and very optimized. So it's very important that you learn how to work with people, and you learn how to unify your team so you can achieve. And we talked about team, and we talked about how teams can go through a period of pain, but ultimately, if they stick together, go to happy hour, sometimes, my best successes were not at work. They were outside of work, and it was actually in a more relaxed environment. So learn how to step outside of comfort zone, and not everybody can do that. Your personality may not be amenable to that, but learn how to flex your personality to try to compromise with other personalities. We also want to talk about lessons learned in engineering, and when I conclude this, I'll introduce our lecturer for today. He will just be speaking for 10 minutes or less, but I want him to have an opportunity to talk about um, his ideas. But lessons learned in engineering, just make sure you keep others informed and in the communication loop, because you're going to see situations, particularly during failure investigations, where facts are turned into false rumors, and that can cause people to make decisions about the fault tree. We talked about the fault tree, or the fishbone. You can start making decisions about those incorrectly. Also, learn to praise in public and criticize in private. You may be working with other people in your team, and if somebody does something really well, learn how to praise that person in public. But when somebody does something incorrectly in your team, learn how to talk to them in private, because when you criticize somebody in public, what you've done is you've opened up it becomes uncomfortable for them, but they also become defensive and they can close up, and they may not be able to express everything they want to express. And what you really want to do in engineering to have a successful design, you want people to talk, and that will suppress that. It's important to question analytical data. Um, and it's also important to make sure that any analytical data you're looking at, um, it's actually founded on something that makes sense. Um, so just keep that in mind. Analytical data can get lost if you have a team that that is not very crisp about what they're doing. Um, And I already talked about the perfect fix. There's no such a thing as a perfect fix. Um, your analysis will never be perfect. They'll be off by 10, 15%. That's why we use a factor of safety for design of 1.5 for airplanes. And we'll be talking about that later today. Um, there are standards that we need to follow, but unfortunately, with aerospace design, they need to be light, and our analysis tools are not perfect. So you need to have enough room to account for those uncertainties, but yet you want to make sure that your analysis is good enough that you're not going to cause an airplane to crash. Um, if it is possible to delay a decision and gather more data, it is important to delay that decision, because a lot of times, if you rush a decision in engineering, it can actually matter, and lives do depend on that answer. We covered that with the Columbia investigation, the Challenger investigation, and multiple aircraft investigation. So a delay is better than a loss of life. If I told you that tomorrow we're going to launch a vehicle to the moon, and we have astronauts in them, and there's this pressure, this political pressure that you're going to encounter from your management is say, hey, I want to launch tomorrow. And inside your heart, and as an engineer, there is a problem with this valve, and I'm not very certain how this valve is going to react tomorrow's flight, because it's too cold maybe tomorrow. Well, you should not have any fear to speak up. And even if you find the political pressure, even if you think you're going to get fired for speaking up, you got to speak up. And we talked about that through several failure investigation examples. I think it's better to put your job above your own job, meaning make sure you're fulfilling the mission statement of whatever you're trying to do. In this case, is to launch astronauts successfully. Never be too proud to admit that you don't have all the answers. And that's very important. In engineering, you're going to see a lot of people are going to say, I know everything, but those are the people that make the biggest mistakes. So it's important that you consult the experts. And I always encourage everybody here to do so. Never let a professional disagreement to go to personal level. It's important that you keep your arrogance to a check. I'll be honest, I'm an arrogant person, and I do have to keep that in check. I know that about myself. So keep your professional disagreement at the personal level. Sorry, never let the professional disagreement go to a personal level. Also, I want to skip number 7. I already covered it. Number 8, failure of management and organizational structure can be a big problem in the industry, as any technical problem. And you take the Columbia investigation, and you'll see that managers create a huge barrier against dissenting opinions by stating that they have some preconceived notions based on subjective knowledge and experience rather than solid data. It's important that when you're talking to management, management has two goals, right? They have to meet some goals. They have to meet some schedules and cost. And they also have political pressure, maybe even from the president of the United States. But your goal is to make sure that anytime you talk to them, you can get to their level. They will never understand very complicated analysis. So you have to learn how to take a very complicated analysis and explain it to them in a way they understand, so they can make better decisions. So it's very important you learn how to communicate with people that do not understand the technical details you're presenting to them, because maybe it's too theoretical. I mean, some of the stuff we do is highly complex. A manager may not understand all those things, but you have to bring it to a level they follow it and they can make those decisions. And it needs to be backed up with solid data, because they're going to ask you, you know, I'm not sure why we're delaying this launch. That makes no sense. Well, you cannot just BS your way through. You have to show why you're stating what you're stating with solid data, but it needs to be done in a way they understand it. We also covered the normalization of deviance, which basically means, oh, I never had a failure with this component, so I think it should be fine. And just keep in mind, a lot of the failures that have occurred in aircraft and launch vehicle design were because of the perfect storm. Everything lined up just right. And because a launch vehicle and aircraft have millions of components, it's not very difficult to cause a perfect storm. So just keep that in mind, that it is important to stay vigilant and to ensure that we're not just accepting things because that's a norm, but we are vigilant to anything that could cause a failure. Finally, I want to point out, when you see someone with skills and capability, it's your job as a leader to make opportunities possible to help them succeed. And what I mean there is, if you're a leader, just always look at skills that people have, and try to, even if you're not a manager, you can make that happen. As part of a team member, you can always have others with better skills than you do, and have them come in there and help you out. um, I think these are the lessons learned I want to pass along with you, before, and in your projects, you can see you have a homework that's very similar to this. So I encourage you to go through that and get it done. With that said, again, the first part of this class will be philosophical, um, and I'll move very soon to our speaker. Key points in engineering that I bring up every year that I want to make sure you guys have very clear is that mistakes are your best teachers, and failures are acceptable, but you want to minimize them when it impacts the life or expensive payload. So even if a failure occurred during, I apologize, even if a failure occurred with a $1 billion satellite or with people in them, unfortunately, that's not a desirable outcome. But it is a situation that will teach you something. Now, why we want to test, why we want to do, and we will be talking about that later. The standards are followed for testing before actual flight. Operational flights are intended to minimize flight failures when they're operational. So you want to learn all your mistakes before the program goes operational, before the 787s become operational, for example. I want to learn about those mistakes now. I don't want to make them later. Take the 737 MAX. Those errors should have been caught way earlier. Learn facts before taking actions based on assumptions. Another important point in engineering. Try to learn the facts, because if you don't learn the facts and they're based on assumptions, if you say, oh, I think the thermal team told me to design this part for 150 degrees F, um, that doesn't sound very strong. But if you said, I have this report from the thermal team, and they're telling me to design this valve to 150 degrees F, well, take that report, read that report, and make sure you understand the assumptions that are being made in that report, and go and talk to them. Because any designs you make based on those assumptions that you may have made incorrectly could influence your designs in a way that's not acceptable. I already talked about number three. Number four, I already talked to you about that. That's called analysis paralysis. If you analyze too much, you will never move. Make sure you're moving, making decisions, but also know how to slow down. Improve constantly. What can I do better? I'll be honest, for myself, I'm not constantly improving myself. Sometimes I am, but that's something that you want to pay attention. In engineering, you're going to find a lot of people asking for your time, and you're not going to have time. You're going to have 100 emails from different people. Some of them matter, some of them don't matter. If you check your email all throughout the day, you'll be completely inefficient. So I believe that you may want to look at Franklin Covey, for a way, Franklin Covey, for a way of managing your time and determining what is urgent, what is essential, what is important, what can be put off, basically defer it for a later time. Um, but not every email is important. Not every email is urgent. So that's where you want to start looking at, evaluating that as you move throughout the day. Learn how to brainstorm in a team environment. I talked about that earlier. I was hoping you guys will do a fall tree and a fishbone for a failure investigation that was hypothetical in a team environment. We get to do that every year, and I appreciate your efforts to do that through the cloud. But it'll have been fun to be in the same room trying to do it. And so brainstorming, you don't start to tell people that makes no sense during brainstorming. You allow all the ideas to come in. That's very important. And then you want to organize those ideas in a way that makes sense. And also, one of the most important aspects is work-life balance. I want to say this and emphasize it. There's a lot of pressure in the space industry, and also in the way we operate here in the United States in general and other countries. But work can affect your ability to be successful at work. It sounds very weird, but if you put too many hours at work, then that by itself will influence the way you operate at work in an adverse way. So it's important to focus on life, also making sure you exercise, eat well, and be balanced. Because if you don't, it's going to affect how you make decisions at work. You may be grumpy at people at work. You may be unhappy all the time, and people are like they don't want to talk to you. Well, it could be for multiple reasons. I've gone through some life events on my own, and I can see it. I can see it on myself when I step to work, which side of the bed I woke up. But it's important to be cognizant of that, and you want to basically put yourself in the best possible mindset when you design a part, when you work on the risk assessment of a flight issue. You want to have the best mental state when you step into that, because a lot of lives are in your hands. Okay. So, with that said, are there any questions before I proceed? Any questions? Let me do a mic check because it seems like it went quiet for a second.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, any questions you guys have for me? Okay, with that said, I'm going to now turn it over to our invited speaker, Dr. J.R. Woodward. He has a Master's of Arts in Global Leadership. Also, he has a doctorate degree. He's an entrepreneur. He's an expert at developing tight-knit communities. He's the author of Creating a Missional Culture. He's co-founded the com, co, co not he didn't confuse himself, but he co-founded the Mission Alliance. He serves as the national director of V3. He's a co-founder of Praxis Gathering. And one of the things I like about Dr. J.R. Woodward is he does have a great, what I've seen for myself is a good work-life balance. Surfs, travels, reads, skateboards, enjoys. One of the most amazing human beings I've come across. So with that, I want to invite you. I put some questions here, JR, but you don't have to answer these particular questions. I want to just speak to our class, our future aerospace engineers, and get some thoughts about career, and things like that. And these days, I've gotten emails from my own students um, students from all over the place, feeling hopeless with these difficult times and the loneliness during the pandemic. So, if you have anything to offer today, we'll appreciate it. So, over to you, JR. And if you guys have questions for him, please go ahead and ask them as well. So it's almost like an open talk here.
Sure. Hey, Vinay, is it better for me to be on video or not? Does it matter?
I'll say let's take it off, no video, just because of the bandwidth, computer
Okay.
bandwidth. Mhm.
Yep. No problem. Well, hey, I'm Vinay. It's good to connect again, and good to be with you guys. I guess, yeah. I mean, I have some thoughts to these questions, and maybe I'll try to intersperse that with, after just listening to you, Vinay, like some of the things you talked about, maybe to double tap on that I think about. I think, and it might be relate to the first question, like how to be impactful in our career or job. In a sense, like I like to, I like to kind of think about like our primal calling in life. Like what is it that we were kind of designed to do and be? So since engineering is a lot about design, I think it's helpful to reflect in a sense, like am I kind of doing the thing that I'm designed to do? I would say for me early in my life, I probably before 21 I had 20 different jobs, and then I went through kind of in just after college, like a little bit of a crisis of what to do, and my sense of, what I'm made for, type of thing, type of question. And I kind of had an idea what I want to do, but I also realized what I didn't want to do. So for a season, I was kind of doing some carpentry work, and I kind of, after about 6 months, I woke up quite depressed. And I am a pretty optimistic person naturally, and so that was I was trying to understand why am I depressed right now? And I realized that, like, I really wasn't cut out to do carpentry work. I'm not, there's a few things that guided me into that, but I just wasn't cut out to do that. And I happened to be reading a book, I believe it's called What Color is Your Parachute by, I think it's Richard Boles. And one of the things he talks about there, which is kind of like this career counseling type of thing, which I think is important for all of us to kind of assess at different times. The earlier, the better, of course. Is he kind of talked about, we either kind of work with things, primarily information, or people, or a combination of them. And what I realized is, like, carpenters work with things, and I was really bad at that. I preferred kind of working with information and people. And so, now I'm kind of a writer, speaker, trainer. So that was a big move. And I think some of the ways that we can discern and kind of differentiate, because I maybe one of the ways I would say is a sense of when we're trying to understand our purpose in life, or maybe I kind of say it in the words of, like, in the language of calling versus career. A calling is something you got to do regardless if you get paid, regardless of what anybody thinks. It's just like, I was made to do this. A career usually just involves, what I'm doing at the moment, how I survive in the world financially in other ways. And I think if our calling can connect with our career, obviously that's the ideal thing. And so some of the things that I kind of wrestled through as it relates to, and again, I think this really does relate to our impact in whatever we're doing, is that there's probably like 4 questions I asked, like, what are my passions? I wasn't so much passionate about carpentry stuff as much as people and information. So what's our motivations, our interest? What kind of gets our blood going? What ideas excite us? What when we think about how do we become energized? I think that's kind of our passions. And someone once told me early on, and I find it to be true in my life, was like, find out what you love to do and do it so well that somebody pays you to do it. And that's probably a pretty good rule if you can live by it. The other thing is just kind of what are our natural abilities. And Vinay kind of talked about, we're all kind of a bundle of strengths and weaknesses. And I think in this way, I like to think about, as you probably know, there's at least 8 types of intelligence that that have been identified. And so it's not just our IQ, but interpersonal intelligence. Some people have linguistic intelligence or musical intelligence, but we all have these kind of natural abilities that just seem to be easier for us to kind of do. Some people are good at math and numbers, and some people at speaking. Some people seem like more naturally athletic, or have mechanical abilities, artistic. So I kind of started to examine my natural abilities. Also, Vinay mentioned our personality and how much that not only shapes our sense of calling, but how we can be a better team player. And and he mentioned the Myers-Briggs, which I find to be super helpful, both for myself and others. I would say maybe the other kind of tool that's been super helpful for me in the area of growing, and that's kind of that interpersonal intelligence. Um, my connection was unstable. I'm still, you can still hear me, Vinay?
Yeah, I'll say repeat maybe after the Myers-Briggs? Just repeat a little
Oh
bit
yeah,
more. Yeah.
yeah. So there's Myers-Briggs, but probably the other tool that's been super helpful for me is called the Enneagram. The Enneagram was probably developed maybe like the 3rd century, probably, before we even wrote many things down, when oral communication was primary, and then eventually, I think it got written down by the Islamic Sufis, but it's actually oriented, and it came to North America through the Jesuits, but it's actually oriented around our common, like, or our most our deepest weakness. And so it's running around like the 7 deadly sins plus fear and deceit. And so it's oriented around what like our deepest fears are and some of our deepest challenges, which I find helpful because there's like this, there's always a path of integration and a path of disintegration. And when you're on the path of integration, you're kind of moving in a healthy way, learning to cope with and in some ways overcome whatever your kind of primal weakness is. And so the Enneagram is not only kind of helpful again for self-awareness, but even team building as well. And then I just think reflecting on, so we got our passions, our natural abilities, our personality, and there's a lot of different ways. There's a DISC test. Uh, there's other types of tests, but probably DISC, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram are some of the helpful ones. And then what are our experiences? Like, what are some of our relational experiences, our educational experiences, our painful experiences, our spiritual experiences? How do they kind of speak to our life? And so I, yeah, so I kind of mentioned that. Maybe the last thing is, and I don't know if it hits all of these other things because these are a lot of questions to do in about 10 minutes. But I do want to mention some resources I found helpful when it comes to building team. One is called the Belbin Team Roles, and it's developed in the UK. I did my PhD in the UK, and I found it extremely helpful in the sense that there was 9 different roles that Meredith Belbin developed for more balanced team. And I'll just kind of quick overview for that, but there's these action-oriented roles, which includes 3 roles. Each of these areas, there's action-oriented, people-oriented, and thought-oriented roles. And obviously people could play more than one role, but just kind of identifying these roles and having clarity in what we're doing is sometimes important. But in the action-oriented, there's the shaper, which challenges a team to improve. There's the implementer, who tends to get things done. There's the completer or finisher that sees the project to completion thoroughly. There's the people-oriented roles, which is your coordinator. They're like the team guide, the leader that's kind of guiding the team toward the objectives. There's a team worker that provides support and just make sure that people work together. There's the resource investigator, where they're exploring all available options, developing context, sometimes negotiating maybe items that need to be bought or whatever on behalf of the team. And then you have the thought-oriented roles, which is a plant, that's the creative innovator who comes up with new ideas and approaches. And I want to kind of say that, Vinay, like when it comes to brainstorming, there's that there's kind of divergent thinking, which is really the brainstorming space, and convergent thinking. And if we were all together, I might kind of have you stand up where you're at and, reach your hands up to the sky. And so kind of just imagine doing that, throwing your hands up into the sky and think about how you feel in that moment. And then like take a minute and take your hands and put them down to touch your feet and think about how you feel at that moment. Probably those are 2 ways to think about divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And number 1 is like you can't do these at the same time. And so when you want to engage in divergent thinking, brainstorming, you really have to release yourself to do that well. And there's some good tools that can help you with that, because we're all kind of caught. Our brains have a certain way of thinking, and we develop these deep canals in our brain that are really hard to switch off. And so divergent thinking can be helpful. And only after we kind of do the divergent thinking do we then move to convergent thinking, which is like, okay, let's kind of look at other ideas. And there's some tools to help kind of conceptual ideas, put these ideas together, and then you look at what concretely should we do, why should we do them, what has some high value and little complexity, high value, low complexity, low value, uh, low complexity, and so forth. So you have that continuum in which you can kind of discern what to do. I'll leave you with the last bit. I don't know where I'm at with time. How am I doing with time, Vinay? Do I get one last thought?
You can keep going, and I also want students to be able to ask questions if they have any.
Sure, sure. Um, and yeah. So the last one would kind of deal with like, I think speaking to maybe double tapping on kind of the importance of our own kind of well-being. Some people we call it, we call it self-care, um, because I think self-awareness, self-care, and are pretty key ideas on being a good team member. And I think when it comes to anything that we're doing, I think it was there's a, I don't know, maybe some of you guys heard the TV show The Prophet. Marcus is a guy who on there, but he kind of basically goes to failing businesses and tries to get them back on the ground. And he has a pretty simple formula. There's people, there's process, and there's the product. People is like, he basically says if the people that are working together isn't working, then it's pretty much no matter what you want to do, it's not going to happen. Processes deals with the systems that you set up and structures and the feedback systems, and the product is, in the end, what are you kind of making, and is it something that is helpful, is it good, is it for the common good, all of that. And so he's always looking for uh, things, problems related. Is it a product that people need, or is it just unhelpful? Maybe that's why it's not selling. Is there something wrong with the process? But really the first thing, I think, with any organization, with any business, with any venture, with any job, is it always comes back down to the people. The people are always the key element, and how we interact with each other. And so when it comes to our own personal health, so this could deal with loneliness or hopelessness or any of that. I basically have like three what I call like rules of life, and rule and rhythm of life, if you will. And I would say that all of us have a rule and rhythm of life. If I followed you around for a week, I'll tell you what your rule and rhythm is. The rule is kind of what you do, kind of what discipline you're engaged in, whether it's like resting, eating, watching TV, reading, exercising, whatever you're kind of engaged in. That's a rule. The rhythm is how often you do it. And so for me, this is kind of simple, but sometimes simplicity is some of the best wisdom. So one is just being physically refreshed. And Vinay definitely touched on that. But for me, that's about diet, exercise, and sleep are probably the key elements. I personally have a sweet tooth, which I am kind of paying for now, in the sense that about a year and a half ago, even though I'm pretty good shape, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and so I've had to pay attention much more to what I eat, to my, obviously, my blood glucose level. Part of the reason, even right now, I'm down in Hawaii since March in the pandemic, is because if I got COVID, I'd have like 1 in 10 chances of dying. So thankfully I got friends most all around the world, and some people are hooking me up with a place to stay while I'm down here. So diet is important. Exercise, diet and exercise is probably the biggest thing to really coping with diabetes. And so I kind of, the other nice thing of being in Hawaii is like I'm 15 minutes from the ocean. So I just walk there every day, swim every day, and that's pretty good exercise for me. I do some other things. I surf when I can and so forth. And then sleep. I'm not necessarily a great example of somebody who has a regular rhythm of sleep, but the more regular we can, and I'm able to monitor my sleep a lot better with my Apple Watch and sleep app, and and they say it's good to have a good strong combination of deep sleep and REM sleep. If we're lacking in one of those, it can be pretty harmful for us. The other thing, physically refreshed, emotionally recharged. And when I think about this, is like maybe we think about the physical realm, but we also need to think about the emotional realm. There's even a whole book on emotional intelligence, why that can matter more than IQ by Daniel Coleman, but that more relates to interpersonal intelligence. But I think emotionally recharged is just being able to recreate energy for ourselves. And so in some ways, the word recreation comes from recreate, that idea of recreating. And so what is it that we love to do that energizes us, that helps us to kind of recharge? And so a lot of times in my bio, I like to put what I do that, that helps me do that. So for me, it's like surfing when I have to face a wave that's huge. And I'm in a place where I can't really think about all my other problems that I tend to think about and deal with. All of a sudden it's the wave, and there's something totally refreshing after about an hour or two surfing that I probably couldn't get any other way. I like photography. I like ping pong. I like film, travel, and I just identify these things that energize me. And then, but and along with the emotional recharge, I think there needs to be a rhythm of just this kind of connects to the third one, which is being spiritually renewed. And so whatever kind of spirituality you might have, I think it's important to recognize the inner part of ourselves. So however you might describe that. And these kind of work together. And I think for me, having time to divert daily from the craziness of my life, having moments of silence, taking time for solitude, or reading, or maybe in a pandemic, it's trying to find a rhythm where I, connect with people. I like to travel. I can't really travel during this time. So I kind of been connecting with international people through an app called Hello Talk. And there's a lot of people in the world that want to learn English. And you might find, if you kind of deal with loneliness, just kind of trying out an app like Hello Talk, connecting with people, maybe you want to learn a new language, or just help somebody else learn a new language and build some friendships that way. But I take some time to divert daily, like 20 minutes, just to kind of reflect more. I take time to maintain monthly. So I might take a half a day a month where I just take this time to reflect and or solitude or silence, or just reflect on my life. And then there's withdrawing weekly. I try to take a day a week where I don't deal with my work, anything but work. I don't plan that day out. I just take things as they go. And then I personally take a time to abandon annually. And I'm able to do at this point in my life, take the whole month of December off. Typically, I travel to another country. I've been to 48 countries. My goal is 100 countries. And I just leave everything behind. I have a great team. They take care of everything else. It's the best time to take off in the cycle of my work right now. And so I'll leave it at that. So physically refreshed. What do I do to be physically refreshed, emotionally charged, and spiritually renewed?
Well, beautiful, JR. I want to emphasize that in engineering, it's not about a math and theory. There's a lot of other things that come into play, and what we're talking about today is intangibles that you may not realize are important in your career. So, with that said, I want to open it up for 5 minutes of questions, um, and yeah. So let's open it up. If you have any questions to me or JR.
Um, what does your job kind of look like on a day-to-day basis, and what do you like the most about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably more like project by project for me. That obviously kind of works its way out to day to day, but I probably um, operate by kind of whatever my primary projects going on right now. And I'm kind of a procrastinator a little bit. So I'm very much energized by deadlines. And so and oftentimes those are, in my control, kind of as a person who heads up the organization that I lead. Um, I kind of have my main goal, which is like head up a national training organization where we do an 8-month long training for people that are kind of entrepreneurs and starting new things. and we do a week to week, you could say a week to week, like Zoom call. We've been into Zoom before Zoom became a popular word. And so, yeah, I just probably orient around my projects. What are the next big three things that need to get done in order for us to kind of move toward our mission? Who needs to be at the table to see them done, and then developing the creative processes to get them going. I'm also a writer and speaker on the side, which very much connects to what I do. So I'm currently, one of my big projects is my next book that I'm working on, and then creative ways and avenues in which to kind of get the message out on that book. So there's the book, but then there's all of the things to help people become aware of the things that you feel are important that might be beneficial to them. I don't know if that kind of helps, but we just started kind of our new year in the fall. And so a big part of my job, like in January to the kind of late spring, early summer, is recruiting, finding ways to freshly get the word out about what we do. And then we're kind of interviewing people and accepting people into the training program. It's kind of strengthening the coaches. We have about 30 coaches. This year we're kind of have maybe just over 112 people in our training, and so we have to think about how do we kind of strengthen our coaches so they can be a better coach. How do we kind of build this sense of momentum and team? What are especially with COVID, we've had to do a lot of thinking on the fly and innovating the things that we do, even though a lot of our stuff was already online. And so, yeah, that would be an answer.
Thank you, JR. Are there any other questions that are basically you feel that he could answer that's going to help your career moving forward? Any questions you have, it could be about career or something like that. And then we'll then get started with the next phase of this lecture today. Okay, with that said, thank you, JR. I'm going to thank you and thank you for everybody here. If you want to go off mute and give a round of applause, we appreciate your presence today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Good to
Hello?
Yeah, good to be with you guys. Take care.
Thank you, JR. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye-bye.